Hello, this is Heather Hoffman, and I'm here today to share another way with you to use the February 2020 card kit from Simon Says Stamp. Kind of a different way to create a shaker card using the included stamp set called window frames. I'm using that beautiful floral frame, and I'd love this. I think it would be great for lots of fun different possibilities. But I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss it on a panel of Neenah Solar White cardstock. I'm using my Simon Says embossing ink, and with a clear stamp when I'm embossing like this, I usually like to use my Misty and stamp several times just because there's so much detail, and that way I know I don't miss anything. I went ahead and heat embossed that with white embossing powder, and then I'm just going to do some emboss resist blending over the top. I'm using my Distress inks in kind of a fun different color combo. I started off with dried marigold, then I'm going to add a little bit of wilted violet and salty ocean and abandoned coral, and I'm just kind of going from top to bottom, really soft touch, just a tiny bit of ink, and just blend really soft to get a nice non-blotchy look and just kind of soft colors. And then as you keep blending, and if you're not getting enough color, just kind of keep going over it with that same soft touch, and you can apply more pressure as you go if you feel like you're just not quite getting enough color and want a little more on there. And then once I finish, I kind of go back in sometimes and just blend between those lines a little bit more. All right, before I move on now, I'm going to die cut the coordinating die that came with that called Tri-Square. I taped it in place and ran it through my die cut machine, but I want to create one big shaker instead of the three small. So I'm going to use an X-Acto knife just to trim off that little bit of extra in the middle of each. I'm using a T ruler to make sure I line it up and get straight, but truly any ruler would work on that. Just line it up. X-Acto knife. You can even sneak in there with scissors. In fact, when I'm done, I noticed I kind of had a couple little imperfections, so I just came in with my scissors to fix that little bit. So I honestly don't know which way would have been easier. So if you don't happen to have an X-Acto knife and mat or anything, scissors work just fine for this. All right, now I'm going to go around and just really loosely fussy cut out that image. I'm not cutting in great detail around the image, just kind of a rough outline. This is going to be to create that shaker element. Fix any little areas that you see that you want a little closer once you're all done, but that felt pretty good and about balanced. All right, now I'm going to use some clear acetate to create the backing for my shaker card. I'm starting off by measuring about how wide my window is so I can cut my acetate a little bit wider so it'll cover all the way through, and I'm going to cut 2 strips. I'm leaving them a little bit long, you might notice, and I'm just going to, you could trim them down to the right size, but I'm going to trim it off when I get to that point. I'm using that 1/8" Scor-Tape to go around the window, and then as you can see, I set that acetate on there and just trimmed off the extra that I didn't need. Now you need to create a pocket, and that's where the shaker filling is going to go. So I'm just trimming down wider strips of foam adhesive. The important thing is to make sure you have a tight seal. Make sure that foam adhesive is completely touching around all edges so there's nowhere for that shaker filling to leak out. All right, now I'm filling this up with some sparkling clear confetti mix from Pretty Pink Posh. This is kind of a mixed size. And once I have those all in there, I'm going to very carefully peel off the backing to that foam adhesive. It's easy for, if you kind of wiggle it or anything, some of that filling can kind of come up and get stuck on the foam tape. So watch that. And then stick that other piece of acetate on the back and trim off the extra that, once again, you don't need. And there you have your shaker element, which is already fun as is. You could almost use it for a tag and just add a sentiment. But I wanted to add it onto a card. So I have a card base that I've created with AUDREY blue Simon Says Stamp cardstock. It was a little too bold there, so I tore the edge on a panel of some thinner, this is Neenah 80-pound solar white cardstock. I like for torn edge a slightly lighter weight. It's just a little easier to tear and get that torn edge. So 1 layer wasn't quite enough, so I stacked up 2 layers with kind of alternating torn edges just to add a little bit of texture and interest to that background. All right, adhere all those layers together and then adhere them all onto the card base. Once these panels are all adhered in place on that card base, I'm going to trim off just a little tiny bit of excess that slides over the bottom there. And then I'm going to add a sentiment, heat embossed in white on black cardstock. It's one of my favorite ways to do sentiments. I keep A2 width panels of black cardstock on hand. Then it's easy to stamp and heat emboss that sentiment. And then I can just use my paper trimmer to trim it down into thin strips, just like that. Since this was such a tiny, dainty sentiment, I just wanted the strip to be nice and small. I'm going to hand trim those into little banner shapes on each end. I trimmed them down a little narrower than the width of the card because I wanted that banner just to go kind of over the shaker and just a little into that white portion. All right, as one final touch, just to add a little bit to the sparkle, I have some silver thread that I decided to pull out and kind of make a bundle and loop. And I always get my bundle ready and then forget to put adhesive on the back of my sentiment. So I just used my scissors to kind of hold that in place so I wouldn't lose that bundle I prepared. And then get my foam, or not foam tape, I just used that 1/8" Scor-Tape on the back of that sentiment and adhere it over, and that's going to hold that gold, or in this case silver thread, in place right underneath that sentiment for some fun texture. Thanks so much for coming by today. Have a wonderful day.